Greetings, my name is John Savers. This is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. I'm your host, and today we'll be reviewing a fairly recent film, a very popular film, a film that was acclaimed as a possible Oscar winner in a number of departments, entitled Pulp Fiction. This particular film was a episodic film. It was irregular in its structure. Now, this particular story is not told in a straightforward narrative, but is rather circular. It does not have the classic line of a beginning, a middle, and an end, which in my mind is a perfect order of things. The opening segment was not completed until the end of the movie, and it was kind of interesting in that the opening of this particular film had as the camera perspective two hoodlums, a couple that happened to be British, who were discussing, of all things, robbing various kinds of businesses and the merits to be found in robbing this one or in robbing that one. At the end, the perspective of the camera begins on the characters of Jules and Vincent. And as the story progresses in this episode, this final episode, it blends the beginning episode of the British couple and the American couple, Jules and Vincent, and a kind of dialectic occurs, helped along or impeded, depending on your point of view, by a sort of Mexican standoff. And the last part of this particular film was dominated by the Jules character. Parenthetically, now, I saw this movie basically quite a few years back under the title of Trash. Trash was a movie that was brought out of the factory, the Andy Warhol, Paul Morisi combine, and starred Joe D'Alessandro and Holly Woodlawn and so forth. In this particular rendering in Trash of this milieu, we see basically in this particular film, Trash, the emphasis is more on the taboo nature of sex as a era in which sex was still considered to have some sort of moral burden to it, and therefore a filmmaker could focus on sex and still seem risque and to be in the way avant-garde, if not in terms of structure of film, at least in subject matter. But this being a new age, and one in which it would be hard to find very many people in the audience that considered a liberal or libertine movie objectionable. This particular remake focused on violence, generally speaking, and that still carries a certain moral burden, perhaps because people are more fearful of it than sex. I will say that it's kind of interesting that the Morisi film Trash and the Tarantino film Pulp Fiction both have titles which are very close to being synonyms. The musical piece which opened up this particular film was an effective piece. It was upbeat, percussive, suggestive of the rap music sound, although this particular sound is ancient, at least in the Levant. This particular sound evolved into a Mexican or Iberian type of musical sound. And this sound itself blended into a kind of Middle Eastern sound in which we have sinuous sounds sprouting and twisting like vines. It was quite effective, and I think it catches the international cultural flavor of L.A., and perhaps the director is trying to be a little bit avant-garde in the sense of a world in which the various cultural combinations are well blended. The director of this particular movie, Tarantino, I think has a rather destructive point of view, and I would consider him amongst those in Hollywood and New York who would fall into the category of misanthropic, or having a misanthropic vision. Now, as regards the opening scene of the Brit couple, we see a kind of incongruity from the outset, even before their peculiar conversation, in the lighting, which is quite white and floods the right side of the face and torso of the Brit male, who therefore begins to look like an eerie kind of bird, a spooky kind of exotic bird. He's unkempt looking and apparently in his 30s. The scene is incongruous not only because of the singularity of the lighting, but because of the fact that he has a British accent, which is he and his girlfriend are both British accented, and somehow this is not anticipated. The restaurant, which is apparently a Denny's school of cuisine type of restaurant or diner, was the locale, and we see carrying on this unexpected conversation. He himself and his girlfriend appeared to be sort of bitter end types, and this is kind of strange in the way. One wonders how they got to the United States to begin with. And she is skinny and drab and psychotic looking. They refer to each other relentlessly in very sweet terms, which also seems somehow incongruous as the conversation was of a criminal nature from beginning to end. But as regards this British couple, it seems to me that they quickly set a certain tone which undoubtedly became an intended thematic element, and that is the loyalty so often exhibited in this particular category of peoples, this sort of underworld. We see this particularly in the British woman. We also see it in the Bruce Willis character, and we see it in the relationship between Jules and Vincent. And we see it working in Vincent as he escorts his boss's wife out on a date. We see in the way we see this loyalty in the Christopher Walken character, the fact that he made this effort to come and see his prisoner of war friend's son and to try to imbue in him the family tradition to temporarily at least stand in for the father as a figure that the son should perhaps emulate. Now, I would like to make a comment here, kind of parenthetically, that The Vincent character, Travolta, in this particular film is so depicted that I feel he would be right at home amongst the Parisian vampires in Brad Pitt's and Tom Cruise's vehicle, Chronicles of the Vampire. Now, this film stars a gaggle of second-tier actors and actresses. This is not to say that they cannot act, but rather that they are second, and in some cases third-tier actors and actresses. Perhaps the leading name was John Travolta and/or Bruce Willis. Travolta, of course, starred as Vincent, arguably the star. It also had Bruce Willis as the boxer, who might also claim that he was a star. In a movie without point or storyline, it's kind of hard to make that decision. There were interesting portrayals of the hoodlum king, Marcellus, and his good vassal, Jules. And I will say that although I thought Travolta and Jules gave good performances, the rave notices given to Jules, the actor who portrayed Jules, were overdone. The actress who portrayed Marcellus's wife, at first appearance, seemed inexpressive, seemed to be a set-faced, a deadpan-faced sort of person, and therefore it was not clear how she could express herself in her art as an actress. But we learned from observing her, especially in the 50s theme restaurant bar, that she was in fact rather good. We see her toying with a cherry and over food and so forth, and making conversations and whatnot, and she has a kind of subtle and engaging style to her, and we admire her work. It is in the opening episode involving Travolta that we learn that he has been in Europe apparently for some 3 years, apparently also taking care of business for Marcellus. Therefore, we see him to be a very trusted individual within the gang framework, and he is welcomed warmly by Marcellus when he goes to the office of the hoodlum king. It might also be noted that while at the office of the hoodlum king, he encounters a Bruce Willis exiting, and it's quite clear that they don't care too much for each other. At any rate, there is a conflict that is generated, which will be resolved later in the sense that it is Willis that kills Travolta. It is in the opening episodes of this film in which Vincent is riding with Jules as they are going to encounter a small gang that has crossed the hoodlum king, and for which the same 3 hoodlums are going to pay with their lives. Then we learn that Vincent has been in Europe for 3 years, and he relates some of the peculiar cultural ways of Europe in a style which is humorous and enjoyable. And the conversation between Jules and Vincent is a very intriguing thing because of its ordinary quality, even though that they are going on a mission to kill 3 people. possibly more, because the exact number they were not sure of. Now it is at this location where the three men are killed that we find Jules experiencing a kind of religious epiphany. From behind the door, a third member of the gang appears with a rather large gun, handgun, and who unloads it at both Vincent and Jules, and misses with all 6 shots. And this, in the mind of Jules, was a miracle. It was the hand of God preserving them for some reason inexplicable. Now, Jules was fond of quoting Isaiah, and his quotation had a very chilling quality to it, a reading from the lips of the angel of death, as it were, he being that angel of death. As a kind of messenger from Marcellus, he might well be depicted as an angel of death. Angels being messengers, of course. One of the striking things about this particular film was the ordinariness with which these men killed. The anesthetizing quality of this film is also striking, for not only are the actors and actresses anesthetized to their dreadful milieu, but the audience becomes also anesthetized. And for this particular reason, the film is particularly seditious, and I think especially dangerous for that particular reason. This particular film has some very dull conversation in it. We see couples talking, and their conversation is of a banal quality, and one cannot help but think of the European films of Ingmar Bergman and certain French films also, where this quality is so evident. I happen to be of that school of thought that actions speak louder than words, but with the advent of television and soap operas, we see often these long, boring conversations, or conversations which are not technically long, but which seem long because they're so boring. We had a little touch of this when the Vincent character took out on, as a date, escort date, so to speak, the wife of the hoodlum king, and took her to a 50s theme restaurant and bar where they were waited on by a Buddy Holly character, and there were other such characters as Marilyn Monroe and Mamie Van Doren and Ed Sullivan and this sort of thing. Elvis Presley look-alike singing on the stage. And they had some of that conversation which was initiated by the girl, the woman, that was, I thought, of this kind. She may have been just teasing in the way, but his replies were kind of goofy, so there was a humor to it. Now, in this particular episode, there was a dance contest, and the hoodlum king's wife insisted that they enter and that he had better win. So we get to see Travolta and the woman dancing a twist, which of course would be appropriate for this locale. And they do win the prize. Interestingly, it was interesting for those of us who saw Travolta in Saturday Night Fever that he had not entirely lost his ability to dance, although he looked somewhat like a rotund penguin out there, but he managed to go through the steps. This particular film had considerable sequences of drug usage. We see this particularly in the Vincent character, who goes to a pad and purchases heroin, and we see them shooting up and get a sense of the feeling that he is feeling. And we see the wife of the hoodlum king snorting lines of cocaine, and we see them drinking quite a lot. And so these particular characters are moving through the sort of deadened milieu in which they operate in a anesthetized fashion. And maybe that's the only way you can survive in that kind of milieu. We see some comic aspects to this. There is not a moral judgment made in regard to the use of drugs. There is simply a implied warning that drugs can be dangerous if abused. This is made manifestly evident in the fact that the wife of the hoodlum king OD'd, and it was only an injection of adrenaline directly into the heart at the heroin pad administered by Vincent that pulled the woman out of her comatose state. She in no way gave evidence that she planned to change her ways in regard to use of cocaine. Now, there was a kind of a humorous scene in the 50s restaurant, 50s themed restaurant, in which the wife of the hoodlum king announces that she's going to powder her nose. And of course, that expression took on a whole new meaning during the late 70s and early 80s. And she, of course, went to the women's restroom to snort some cocaine. We see a gaggle of young women apparently preening in the mirror, and from below, exploding out, we see the figure of the hoodlum's wife, who has just indulged herself in a few lines of cocaine in the restroom. She is very good, this actress, at depicting a kind of animal hunger, animal appetite in regard to this drug. It's related as a kind of feast, and a nose feast, as it were, and she indicates the same kinds of pleasure that a hungry person might exhibit while gorging on some favored nutrient. Now, in regard to the hoodlum king Marcellus, it was interesting to note that he was portrayed as having a rather large band-aid on the back of his head, basically where the skull meets the back of the neck. And why it is there is curious, to say the least. It, of course, could be a cover-up for a shaving cut. And it also could be suggestive of the old saying, a pain in the neck. But we assume that there was some purpose in putting the Band-Aid there. The hoodlum king, Marcellus, is presented as a wise elder sort of figure. We hear his wisdom offered to the Willis character in regard to the subject's pride, loyalty, and taking a fall. or taking a dive. And we see this particular figure as not only a rendering of a kind of wise man, but as a powerful figure and as a dangerous and evil figure. So that he's well suited for his particular role and in no way can be considered a benign figure. He has a large, stolid appearance, which is not altogether foreign to a Buddha-like head or statue. We usually see this man, for some reason, from the rear, seated. And we find ourselves not looking into his eyes so much, but at the Band-Aid on the back of his head, which is a curious thing. I cannot recommend this particular film, Pulp Fiction, to the viewers, many of whom have already seen the film. But this is a destructive film, a misanthropic film, a film which can in no way make anyone a better person. It has maybe the contrary effect of aiding in a deadening of the sensibility which this particular nation can ill afford in its people.